So last week, if I remember correctly, we had gone over because what the ancient world looked like, in the time of Paul. We're looking at the Apostle Paul. I always like to kind of give some background information on the world so we can actually understand what is going on during this time. It never really made sense to me just to talk about a person and their actions and their decisions and stuff like that. We're really understanding the environment that this person was in. So it's important to understand the environment that not only the Jewish people were in, but by extension the Apostle Paul as well, and how that affected the psyche of Jewish people living in a pagan world, a hostile pagan world a lot. And the same with Paul. How did that affect their psyche? Well, we'll look at that. Some people chose different paths. Some Jews chose the path of integration. We're going to go into the Rome or this other city. We're going to set up a little community. We'll do our own thing. Other people said, no, we're going to stay right here in the land. We're not associating with them at all. This is the land that God has given us. We're not going. And I think those two types of Jewish people had a very different outlook on the world. Okay, and so that's going to be an issue that is going to rear its ugly head as we go on here. So, what is this all about? Major revolts and riots in the empire. I want everyone, maybe you've already been staring at this for a little bit, but take 1 minute and just take a look at that. And then I'd like some feedback on what you think is going on in this map. Major revolts and riots from 4 BC, okay, to 200 AD. Every fire represents a major revolt in the Roman world. So what do you think? What is Ben? What is something that jumps out at you?
It's interesting and maybe not surprising that a lot are on the frontier.
Okay. Yes, around the frontier. Very good. At the extent of Roman control. Very good. Somebody else? Going once, going twice. How about, let's take a look at the area of what is known today as Israel. Okay. Ben made a great point that a lot of these revolts are happening, for the most part, on the edges of the Roman Empire, and that's absolutely true. Unfortunately for the Romans, the Jews were on the edge of their empire and their area of control. And also for the Romans, the Jews were right next to their hated enemies, the Romans' hated enemy, which were the Parthians or the Persians. And so the Jews were right there on the border. And that was no bueno for the Romans, because what the Romans wanted was a stable area, a nice buffer zone between the Persians and themselves. The Jewish people were not giving them a stable buffer zone at all. In fact, if we look at here in the corner, the bottom right-hand corner, look at all the fires in that area. Okay, particularly like Alexandria. I think we talked about this. There was a sizable Jewish community in Alexandria, and they actually had a lot of battles with the Greeks. The Greeks hated the Jews hated the Greeks. It wasn't great. And then, of course, you see the revolts that happened in and around Judah, in and around Israel. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 anyways, okay? So this was an area of unrest. This was an area that was constantly on the minds of the Roman government because they were concerned about it. And so I just want to kind of give you, a little sense of what, how the Romans looked at it. The Romans didn't look at it as the Jews were just, that little backwater. In some cases they were, but they were also extremely important to the security of the Roman Empire. All right, moving on. So let's take a look at this. Jews in the Gentile world. Just a quick comment on the right-hand side about the picture that we have up there. This is of a biblical scene. Anyone know? Anyone venture a guess on what this scene is presenting to us? Oh! Ben's the A student. This is why he sat up front. So this is Moses is found by Pharaoh's daughter, drawing him out of the water, right? And you have the different people. You can see the little the Ark of Bulrushes there. They kind of made it like a building or something like that. It's interesting. Now, here's another little interesting thing about this. This was found in a Jewish synagogue, this painting, this fresco, in a Jewish synagogue on one of the outposts on the border of with the Persians and the Romans. Okay, so Jews were right there on the border as well. Right down the street from this synagogue, what was there as well? Anyone know? This is around 200 A.D. Right down the street from the synagogue, there was a Christian church, a house church. And they have this. You can actually go. I think I showed some pictures of this. But so this just shows you that, right down the street from this synagogue in Dura Areopa, you had a very small house church that was going on in the 200s ADs. And so even during this time, you had interaction between the early day Christians and the Jewish communities. Unfortunately, they're going to grow further and further apart, as we're going to find out, we have the situation that we have now. All right, so we know that the Babylonian captivity is going to happen around 600 BC, right? We're talking about 2,500 years ago, okay? We know that they were dispersed. The Assyrians came down first into Israel, the scattered tribes, the lost tribes of we have no idea where they were taken. The same with some of the Jews from the Babylonian captivity as well. They're lost to history. We know that there was a sizable community in Babylon for hundreds and hundreds of years of Jewish people. I don't think there's anybody, I think I read someplace that there's like 2 Jews now living in Iraq or something like that. It's crazy. And we know that there was a massive massive population exchange, in 1948. The Arabs kicked all the Jews out, and they had to go to Israel. But anyways, so the Hellenization of the ancient world is going to have an impact on the Jews, and the Hellenization just means the spreading of Greek culture in language, in their philosophy, in their outlook on life, that type of thing. Okay? And so in a lot of ways, through war and conquest, Alexander the Great is going to spread Greek ideals to everybody, including the Jews that were living in Israel at this time. And some of the Jews are going to go with Alexander the Great on his adventures. And there's going to be Jewish soldiers in Alexander's army. And Alexander is going to give them certain, land and, cities that they can live in. So anyways, so they're going to come in contact with all kinds of different peoples. Antiochus Epiphanes, without getting into it, Antiochus Epiphanes was a Greek who controlled the area of Syria. Without getting into it, Alexander the Great's going to die. He's going to divide his giant empire into 4 different sections. They're going to all fight each other. Boo. You have the Antioch up here. You have the Ptolemies down here, down in Egypt. Boom. They're always fighting. Anyways, Antiochus Epiphanes is kind of one of the great scoundrels of history and Jewish history. He's actually going to attack Jerusalem, and he's going to attack Jerusalem, destroy a portion of it, and take Jews captive. We don't really talk about this, but Daniel makes mention of it. Okay, in the 11th or 12th chapter. Anyways, he talks about Antiochus Epiphanes in very kind of cryptic language, but he is going to destroy portions of Jerusalem. He's going to kill tens of thousands of Jews, and he's going to take them captive as well, enslave them, and this is going to be the catalyst for the Maccabee rebellion, okay, which was a group of very devout Jews that said, we've had enough of this. We need our own country. We need to control our borders. We need to control our own culture because we're getting destroyed by these Greeks. These Greeks are coming in and doing whatever they want. And so the Maccabees and other people are saying, look, this needs to stop. We cannot have this influence over and over again. We're losing our culture. We're losing our identity. We're being scattered to the winds. And so the Maccabees are going to revolt against the Greeks, and they're going to be victorious. And in fact, they're going to establish, I think for over 100 years, 150 years, they're going to establish an independent Jewish state during this time. Now, was it from the house of David? No. But the Maccabees and their descendants are going to control this area. They're going to be kings. They're going to be leaders. And this is, Herod's going to come out of this as well. He wasn't a Maccabee. I believe Herod married into the Maccabee family, and he's going to kind of wheel and deal and become Herod the Great. Anyways, there's going to be a deep divide, like a palpable hatred between Greeks and the Jews. Okay, they're just going to be so different. The Greeks are going to look at they only believe in one God. Might as well be an atheist then, right? Look at all these kind of rituals that they go through. Circumcision was a big one for the Greeks, right? Weirdos. But the thing is, without doing a deep dive into circumcision, but the Jews, there were other peoples as well that practiced the circumcision as well, notably the Egyptians. Okay, so it wasn't like this weird thing. The Greeks were just looking for stuff, to get bothered by. A lot of riots are going on, okay, between the Greeks and the Jews. To counter this, and this seems all very comfortable to us, I think, okay? To counter this influence from the Greek world, well, the Jews said, we've got to remain, committed to our traditions, committed to Yahweh, committed to the rituals of the law. This is important. Not only is it a religious thing, but it's a cultural thing as well. Like the identity of a people in the ancient world was always tied to religious beliefs. Always. And so if you destroy a god or a temple in the minds of the ancients, you've destroyed a people. And so the Jews are understanding this, Every time someone goes into Jerusalem and takes something or kills people, comes into our land, we lose a piece of ourselves. And so this is why these revolts are going to happen. And they're going to this is where the Pharisees are going to come out from, okay? And the Pharisees are going to get, and rightfully so, they get a bad rap because, they were putting all these different burdens on the people. They loved the power and the control that their religious positions afforded them. But in a time of kind of upheaval, it was the Pharisees that kind of coalesced the people, the poor people, and impressed upon them the importance of tradition, impressed upon them the importance of Yahweh, obviously, but also their culture. They tied it all together, and they became kind of the traditional religious Jews that we know from the New Testament. Okay, this all came out of this period. And so one thing that I find fascinating, I give this a lot of thought sometimes, God uses certain situations and he uses events of this time period to bring about his purpose. All of these things created the environment for the birth of Christ. God chose this very specific time period, using all of these events to bring his son into the world. Okay, at that particular time. And I think it's just amazing, God, and God in our lives as well. Sometimes we can't see it. The Jews, the faithful Jews couldn't see this, but God was working. He was working in the world to bring about his purpose. Daniel talks about that too, right? The watchers, the angels, what did he say? The prince of Persia withstood me for a certain amount. And I think a lot of this is going on here as well. So there was a separation, a major separation between the Greeks, the Romans, and the Jews, okay? And, there's a lot of disdain on both sides. There's a lot of hatred on both sides, right? The Greeks hated the Jews. The Jews hated the Greeks. And there was arrogance on both parts, right? The Jews were saying, we're the chosen people. Hashem, Yahweh has blessed us. We have the oracles of God. These Greeks are nothing. They're dirt to us. Okay, this is how some people thought, right? And there's still sects of Jews that think like that. Okay, and then you had the Greeks looking down on the Jews as well as were told. So it wasn't a great situation. And this is where the idea of a religious martyr comes in. This is the idea where the zealots come into. The zealots were a group of people where the Pharisees, it wasn't good enough. We got to use violence to get rid of some of these people. We got rid of the Greeks with the Macedonians, but guess who rolled in after the Greeks? The Romans. Okay? And the Romans were a different people. Romans had a different outlook on life. A little more, they wanted to control this area. The Greeks, for the most part, didn't like the Jews, but kind of let them do their thing. When the Romans roll in around 60 BC with Ptolemy, they take over the whole place. You're a province of Rome. Congratulations, right? Now, this is going to afford certain people like Paul the ability to get citizenship. Because in Tarshish, where there was a sizable Jewish population that we'll look at, Lord willing, next week, a lot of them had citizenship. It was a Roman city. They were born to Rome. They were born with Roman citizenship. That was important. So just think about that. We have a time period in Roman history where they were giving Jewish people, Jews, citizenship. They were full citizens of Rome. That was important. There was power in that. And we know that Paul is going to use that power that he has to help his fellow, Christians, but also to help himself, right? To get out of another beating or something like that, right? And we'll look at this, but I love the way that Paul goes after, the centurion. They beat us in public. You're going to apologize in public, different stuff like that. And then there's a great line with Paul tells the centurion, I'm a free man. And the centurion goes, with a great price I bought this freedom. How did you get it? How did you get it? How did a Jew get, citizenship? Well, I was born in Tarshish, buddy. Sorry, can't take it away from me. Let's see. Many Jews leave Israel. Okay, yeah, Jews are going to leave Israel for better prospects. We know that. They're going to settle in the big cities. And you know what? The Jews are going to, as they kind of move throughout Europe and North Africa or stuff like that, they're going to choose the cities, right, to go in. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of trade, a lot more interaction, that type of thing. In other words, Jews are not leaving the land of Israel to go farm, all right? They're looking for other opportunities in these big cities, whether it's Rome, Antioch, or, Alexandria, a huge population of Jews living in Alexandria. Huge. Like 200,000 Jews living in Alexandria. And this is going to be the time period when the Septuagint, okay, the Old Testament, is going to be translated from Hebrew into Greek. Okay? Greek was like the lingua franca, okay, the language that everybody used. Kind of like the language that everybody uses in the airplane industry, aviation, right, which is what language? Aviation language? That is correct. And that aviation language would be? Airplane English? Is that what you said? Airplane English. Perfect. Yeah, it's the language they use is English, okay? And so this is the same thing, like Greek was spoken particularly in the eastern part of the Roman Empire. That was the language everybody used. And so if you wanted to get ahead, if you wanted to do something, you had to learn the language. And that's what the Jews did. They go there and they learned the language. You have to. Like if you don't speak Latin in the ancient world and you go to Rome and try to make a living and get ahead, it's not happening. Okay? All right. Questions, comments before we move on? Fantastic. All right, let's take a look at this. The dispersion of the Jews, we already talked about that, right? It was a state of being. And so they had this connection. The Jews, ancient world, had this connection to the land. They had the connection to Jerusalem. And they would go to Jerusalem, a lot of them, I think there was three times that they had to present themselves to the temple, okay? The major one was Passover. All right, and so that was the big thing. And so we know from the Old Testament, from the New Testament, that tens of thousands of people came from all over the world. Jews are going to come and worship here during the Passover. And we know from Psalm 137, this is kind of a foundational aspect of Judaism, the remembrance of Jerusalem. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, right? Psalm 137, very sad psalm. But the Jews keep this kind of in the back of their minds to always remember Jerusalem. All right. The Jews weren't just like, they weren't just like 5,000, Jews throughout the ancient world, the Roman world. It was a sizable amount. 5 to 7 million Jews lived in the ancient world. There's what now? 16 million in the world today? So, they were doing pretty well in the ancient world. They were doing very well. They had their own little communities in these different cities. They would set up a synagogue, and this is going to be the kind of the center of worship for the Jewish people in all of these different cities, these major cities. Wow, it's almost as if God was kind of setting up a foundation for the teachings of Christ to spread to the Gentile world. Weird. So you have all of these little centers of worship for the Jewish people. It's perfect. It's perfect for some, maybe a traveler that is, maybe has intimate knowledge of the law, has respect from the Jewish community. Imagine if someone like that would be converted. And then we sent this guy to all these different places. Imagine we could spread this message. We'll see. See if that happens. Synagogues can become the center of worship and Jewish culture. We talked about this already, but I just want to reiterate it. State of tension between the Greek, Roman world and the Jews. Okay? Always this tension. Jews are different, right? They're obnoxious. Sometimes the Romans called them obnoxious. They are obnoxious with their religious beliefs. They're obnoxious with their rituals and their diet. Oh, so obnoxious. I think it's kind of like when you have listen, I apologize to all the vegans out there, okay? It's kind of like someone that's really into veganism, right? It's like they're always talking about the diet and what they're doing, all right? And, a certain amount of that is going to be healthy, right? But just, it's one of those things like, this guy's so annoying about the veganism, Did you know? I've probably just isolated a lot of people. Well, I am vegan, Richard. All right. So the synagogue gives them a place to center themselves, a community center, and a place of worship. So just imagine this, okay? This, we can understand this because in a lot of ways, this is our place to center ourselves again, right? We use Christ to center ourselves again. And so they're going to use these synagogues to center themselves. Just think about it. Every day you're getting pressured. It's pressure, paganism, the Roman world. You can go there on Friday night. It's like, oh, you see the pictures of the, all the frescoes. There'd be frescoes reminding the people of different events in the Old Testament. You have Jewish food there. You're speaking in Aramaic or Hebrew or whatever it is. It's like, this is the area. This is my home. Okay, and a lot of times, they were spiritual homes to these Jewish people that were remembering the past, but also kind of in the modern world, which to us is the ancient world. But it was the modern world, right? And I think some of the trials and tribulations, some of the things that they had to go through, I think we have to go through too as a community. Okay? We're a small community. The Jews, in relation to everybody else, were a small community. And so we have to be mindful of that. Is our ecclesia a place to center ourselves? Is our ecclesia a place where people can come to be reminded of the things of God? And that's what was going on in these synagogues. All right, very quickly, I want to just show you a couple maps here that kind of give us an idea of what's going on. The Jewish dispersion routes, you can see in the green there. You can see where they went, all right? Major cities, boom. They went to Mesopotamia, but look, they started in the east and they moved west. And they went to all of the different cities here, even up in modern-day France. Doesn't look like there's anything in Britain up there, but eventually there was. And here are some of the synagogues. Here are some of the towns where synagogues have been found. Okay, remnants of synagogues. And you can see they're all scattered everywhere. Look at it, even up in the Black Sea, up by the Crimea, right? 1, 2, 3. There's still Jews in the Crimea region as well. And so wherever there was trade, wherever there was people, wherever there was communities and cities, for the most part, you're going to find a Jewish community there. And if there wasn't a community, a synagogue, there was still a group of people. In fact, and we'll look at this in Acts, where Paul went, where was it? Was it in Philippi? Where they were down by the river, okay? And he found women worshiping down by the river. And so that was an area where they used to worship before there was a synagogue. Before there was enough Jews, I think you needed to have 12 or 13 male Jews in order to have a synagogue. And so if you didn't have that, they would look for other places, and that would be, one of the places would be the river. Okay? All right. I want to save, let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. Here's an important thing to remember. It wasn't just Jews and Gentiles, okay, and there was no like in between. There were proselytes as well. In other words, there were pagans that had converted to Judaism. All right? Increased Jewish numbers in the Roman world. We're not going to look at these in Isaiah, but the general theme is that the Jewish people were to be a light to the Gentiles. And by extension, Christ would be that light as well. He'd fill the whole world with his light. But it's starting now with these little dots of synagogues, little communities of Jews everywhere, here, there, and everywhere. Okay? Here's a quote from Rabbi Eliezer ben Pidat in the 3rd century. God sent Israel into exile among the nations only for the purpose of acquiring converts. Okay, that's interesting. Are the Jewish people known for their conversions? In other words, do we have Jews knocking on our door? We don't. That's not how they do it. They're not aggressive in that way. What they do is they set up a synagogue and they allowed Gentiles that were interested to come, to listen. Okay, so they had an open door policy as long as you were respectful. They allowed Gentiles in to listen. Okay? Here's another one from Josephus. We all know Josephus. All the time the Jews, were attracting to their worship a great number of Greeks, making them virtually members of their community. Interesting. So around the 1st century, you had Greeks who were interested in the Jews, and they converted to Judaism. Every Friday, Saturday, they'd be at the temple, or in this case, the synagogue. All right, and then lastly, Church Adolf von Harnack. Okay. It is utterly impossible to explain the large number of total Jews in the diaspora by the mere fact of the fertility of Jewish families. We must assume a very large number of pagans trooped over to Yahweh. That was real interesting to me. So even before Paul is on the scene, you already have what Paul refers to, and you can look these up in Acts 13 and Acts 16, Paul refers to them as God-fearers, fearers of God. They were there, they were Gentiles, but they had converted from being a Gentile, from being a pagan, to Judaism. So imagine you have these, and we'll stop here. Imagine you have this person, he just converted to Judaism like 3 or 4 years ago, right? And then the Apostle Paul comes strolling in, and he's like, you know what, I'm changing my religious beliefs again. You just got here. Yeah, see you later.